The Great Depression was a time of immense economic hardship. It began in the United States in 1929 and soon spread across the entire globe. For more than a decade, it gripped nations in a state of crisis. Banks failed, businesses closed, and millions of people lost their jobs and their savings. It was not just a downturn. It was a complete collapse of the world's financial system. The Roaring Twenties, a period of great prosperity and excitement, came to a sudden and shocking end. People who had felt secure and optimistic about the future suddenly found themselves facing uncertainty and fear. The world had never seen an economic crisis quite like this one before. The collapse did not happen overnight, but the stock market crash on October 29, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, was the spark. On that day, panic swept through Wall Street in New York City. Stock prices plummeted as investors rushed to sell their shares. Vast fortunes were wiped out in a matter of hours. This event shattered public confidence, which is the very foundation of any economy. People stopped spending money, and they stopped investing. The ripple effect was immediate and devastating. The crash revealed deep underlying weaknesses that had been growing for years, hidden beneath the surface of the decade's prosperity. It was the beginning of a long and difficult journey for millions. One of the main causes was that people were buying too much on credit. They bought new cars, radios, and household appliances with money they did not have. Companies were also producing more goods than people could actually afford to buy. This created a fragile economic bubble. When the bubble burst, the consequences were severe. Another significant problem was the banking system. Thousands of small independent banks had few regulations and no safety net. When people panicked and rushed to withdraw their money, these banks simply ran out of cash and were forced to close their doors forever, taking their customers' life savings with them. The crisis quickly became a global one. American banks, struggling at home, called back loans they had made to other countries, especially in Europe. Many European nations were still recovering from the devastation of World War I and depended on these loans. When the money dried up, their economies crumbled as well. Governments around the world made matters worse by raising taxes on imported goods, a policy known as protectionism. They hoped to protect their own industries, but this action only choked off international trade. The world became a collection of isolated, struggling economies, each one sinking deeper into the mire of the Depression. For ordinary people, the Great Depression was a daily struggle for survival. The most immediate impact was the loss of jobs. As factories and businesses shut down, unemployment soared to levels never seen before. In the United States, 1 in every 4 workers was jobless. Men who had proudly supported their families for years were suddenly unable to find any work at all. They would stand in long lines called bread lines for a simple meal of bread and soup provided by charities. The sense of failure and despair was overwhelming. A man's identity was often tied to his job, and without it many felt lost and ashamed. Families were torn apart by the strain. Many lost their homes because they could no longer pay their mortgages. Some were forced to live in makeshift shantytowns, which they bitterly called Hoovervilles after the president at the time, Herbert Hoover. These were collections of shacks built from scrap wood, cardboard, and metal. There was no running water, no electricity, only poverty. Inside these shacks, families huddled together, trying to stay warm and keep hope alive. Children suffered greatly. Many were malnourished, and without money for doctors, common illnesses could become life-threatening. The simple joys of childhood were replaced by hunger and uncertainty. In the American heartland, a natural disaster made the economic crisis even worse. A severe drought hit the Great Plains, turning fertile farmland into a barren wasteland. Years of ploughing had removed the native grasses that held the soil in place. When the rain stopped and the winds picked up, massive dust storms swept across the region. These storms, known as black blizzards, buried homes, destroyed crops, and killed livestock. The area became known as the Dust Bowl. The sky would turn dark in the middle of the day, and fine dust would seep into every crack of the houses, covering everything and making it hard to breathe. Forced off their land by the dust and the banks, thousands of farm families packed up their few belongings and headed west. They were called Okies, though they came from many states, not just Oklahoma. They followed Route 66 to California, dreaming of finding work and a new start. But when they arrived, they often found more hardship. They were met with hostility from local residents who feared the newcomers would take their jobs. These migrant families lived in squalid camps, moving from farm to pick fruit or cotton for meager wages. Their story is a powerful reminder of the deep human suffering caused by the Depression. At first, many government leaders did not know how to respond to the crisis. President Herbert Hoover believed in rugged individualism. He thought that the government should not interfere too much in the economy. He encouraged charities and local communities to help those in need. He believed that the economy would correct itself over time. But as the Depression worsened, it became clear that this approach was not enough. People grew angry and desperate for more direct action. They needed a leader who would give them hope and a plan. The suffering was too widespread for private charity alone to solve. In 1932, the United States elected a new president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He came into office with a promise of a new deal for the American people. Roosevelt had a different philosophy. He believed that the federal government had a responsibility to help its citizens directly. In his first inaugural address, he famously told the nation, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." His confident and reassuring voice, broadcast over the radio in his fireside chats, gave many people a renewed sense of hope. He immediately set to work, launching a series of bold programs to fight the Depression. The New Deal was a massive collection of programs and reforms. Its goals were to provide relief, promote recovery, and prevent future depressions. To provide relief, programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, were created. The CCC hired millions of young, unemployed men to work on environmental projects like planting trees and building parks. To promote recovery, the government invested in large public works projects like building dams and bridges, creating jobs and stimulating the economy. The Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, brought electricity and development to a vast, impoverished region of the South. To prevent another crisis, Roosevelt's administration passed major reforms. The Glass-Steagall Act created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, which insured bank deposits. This meant that if a bank failed, people would not lose their life savings. The Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, was established to regulate the stock market and prevent the kind of reckless speculation that led to the 1929 crash. The Social Security Act of 1935 created a national system of pensions for the elderly, unemployment insurance, and aid for dependent children. These programs fundamentally changed the role of government in American life. The Great Depression did not truly end until the United States entered World War II. The massive government spending required for the war effort finally kick-started the economy. Factories roared back to life to produce tanks, planes, and ships. Millions of men went to fight, and millions of women entered the workforce to take their places. While the New Deal had provided critical relief and made important reforms, it was the industrial demand of the war that finally pulled the world out of its long economic slump. The recovery was complete, but the world that emerged was profoundly different from the one that had entered the crisis a decade earlier. The most enduring legacy of the Great Depression was the expanded role of government in people's lives. Before the 1930s, most people did not expect the government to provide a social safety net. After the New Deal, programs like Social Security and unemployment insurance became a permanent part of the American landscape. The idea that the government has a duty to protect its citizens from economic disaster became widely accepted. This change in thinking shaped public policy for generations to come. It created a new understanding of the relationship between a nation and its people, one based on shared responsibility and mutual support. The experience of the Depression also left a deep psychological scar on the generation that lived through it. These people were often called the silent generation. Having known extreme hardship, They valued security and frugality for the rest of their lives. They were careful with their money, avoided debt, and worked hard to build a stable future for their children. They passed these values on, shaping the culture of post-war America. The memory of the breadlines and Hoovervilles served as a constant reminder of how quickly prosperity could vanish, and it fueled a determination to never let such a catastrophe happen again. Today, on July 25, 2025, we can look back and learn important lessons from this difficult period. The Great Depression teaches us about the dangers of unchecked speculation and economic inequality. It shows us how interconnected the global economy is, and how a crisis in one country can quickly spread to others. Most importantly, it reminds us of the importance of compassion and collective action in times of hardship. The stories of ordinary people who endured, helped their neighbors, and fought for a better future are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They teach us that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path forward.